Hi learners, welcome to the second topic on English speaking skills enhancement. The second topic focuses on conflicts in a movie. Let me give an overview of the lesson. In this lesson, firstly the definition on a conflict is explained. Then, the types of conflicts in a movie will be discussed. And lastly, steps in making comments on a conflict are shared. In this lesson, there are 3 topic learning outcomes. Firstly, learners should be able to understand the definition of a conflict in a movie. Secondly, learners should be able to identify the types of conflicts in a movie. And lastly, learners should be able to make comments on a conflict in a movie. What is a conflict in a movie? According to Esther Harding, a therapist, a conflict is the beginning of consciousness. However, this is not the definition which we are going to use in our discussion for our movie commentary. So what is the definition of a conflict in a movie commentary? It is the main problem in a movie which needs to be resolved by the characters, especially the protagonist. A conflict shows the opposition and struggle between the characters. It develops the plots, which at the end we can witness that the conflict is resolved. Let's discuss on the types of conflicts in a movie. There are 2 types, which are the internal and external conflicts. An internal conflict is the struggle that a character has within himself or herself. For example, a struggle with his or her own belief, like the character of Private Desmond Doss, which I have discussed in the topic earlier, which is on the characters in a movie. Private Desmond Doss struggles with his own belief, which he doesn't want to kill people with a gun. The second type of conflict is an external conflict. This happens when a character opposes another character's goal. For example, the characters of Jack and Rose in Titanic, which we discussed in the earlier topic. We know that their relationship is not accepted by the society around them, since both of them came from a different life status. So this is where external conflict happens between the 2 of them and also the society. Let's narrow down the types of external and internal conflicts. For the external conflicts, there are 5 types that we need to know. The first one is a conflict between a person and another person in that movie. This is person versus person conflict. This is the most common type of external conflict, especially between protagonist and antagonist. The 2 characters with opposing opinion, goal, or belief. For example, in the movie Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, we can see that the protagonist, who is Harry Potter, has a conflict with Lord Voldemort, the antagonist in that movie. So this is a good example of person versus person conflict. The second type is person versus nature conflict. This is an external conflict that a character has with a force of nature. For example, with the weather, the environment, or even with an animal. For example, in a movie entitled Twister. And in this movie, we can see that the 2 protagonists, who are Bill and Joe Harding, the storm chasers, have a conflict in facing the violent tornadoes. So this is a very good example of person versus nature conflict. The third type of external conflict is person versus technology conflict. This is an external conflict which the character is against the problem that arises from the technology use, which goes beyond its intended use. For example, in the movie The Terminator, we can see that the protagonist, Carl Reese, goes against a cyborg assassin. So this is an example of person versus technology. The fourth type of external conflict is person versus supernatural. This is an external conflict that a character is against ghosts, aliens, werewolves, witches, or any unexplainable phenomena. For example, in the movie The Conjuring, you can see that the Warrens are against Bathsheba's evil spirit. So this is a conflict between people versus supernatural. The fifth type of external conflict is person versus society. This is where a character is against a law, a tradition, or an organization. For example, in the movie Mulan, so the protagonist, Mulan, has a conflict with her society's belief. So this is a good example of a conflict between person and the society. For the internal conflict, there is one type that we should know, and it is known as person versus self. Person versus self conflict happens when a character is in conflict with his or her own feelings, beliefs, or goals. For example, in the movie Tangled. In this movie, the protagonist, Princess Rapunzel, has to be obedient to her foster mother. But deep inside her, she wants to see the outside world. So this is an example of an internal conflict that the protagonist faces. The next slide will give you the links to all the trailers on the movies which I have mentioned as examples in discussing the types of conflicts. On this slide, you are provided with the links to the trailers of the movies which I have used as my examples in discussing on the types of conflicts. For example, person versus person conflicts, the link given is the trailer to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So if you notice, all the types of conflicts are given the links. Lastly, in this lesson, you will learn on the steps involved in making comments on a conflict. The first step is to identify one conflict in the movie, and this conflict is the main conflict. Ask yourself these two questions. What is the problem in the story? Who are involved in the problem? These two questions will help you to identify the conflict and its type. The second step is to observe how the conflict is resolved. Once you have identified the conflict in the movie, watch how the conflict is resolved. The resolution is always at the end of the movie. The third step is the beginning of your comments. After watching the movie, ask yourself these questions. Are you satisfied with the solution? Do you think that the character has taken appropriate actions to solve the conflict? And finally, step 4 is for you to justify your comments with evidence from the movie. So while watching, make sure that you can identify the evidence so that you can strengthen your comments. So those are the steps that can help you to make comments on a conflict easily. All the best!